Hi, I'm Rick DeJohnette, and today we're going to work on metric modulation. You heard in the demo there that I set one tempo and I played all kinds of tempos within that, and I modulated to those tempos using rhythms like polyrhythms and also rhythms within that tempo. So this is a little bit complicated, so I'll do my best to explain this. Now, first of all, let's talk about what you should listen to hear this kind of thing. The Miles Davis Quintet in the 1960s with Tony Williams, Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, Ron Carter, and of course Miles was a great example of a lot of this metric modulation used in jazz. So if you listen to Live at the Plug Nickel, that box set, or just really any of those recordings, you'll hear lots of examples of this. Another good example that's a little more modern is the Wynton Marsalis Standards record, the first volume. Jeff Watts is on that, and they do all kinds of standards, but they're metrically modulating on almost every one of those tunes. It's really great. So I would suggest listening to those things first. And in the rock and funk realm, you can listen to some Frank Zappa as well with Vinnie Colaiuta or Terry Bozzio. A lot of those records, like Joe's Garage, Live in New York, certain records like that, used forms of metric modulation. So hopefully after today you'll have a basic grasp, although this is a very complicated topic. So, you're going to have to think about it quite a bit. But we'll start simple. So if I put my tempo on 200, which would be the quarter note, and I play in 3/4 at the quarter note, what I'm going to do is show you a real basic metric modulation using dotted quarter notes. And I'll put some things on the screen here so you can understand. So here's the tempo. So it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now the dotted quarter note sounds like this. And when I play that dotted quarter note, that would become the new tempo. So that all right, so I was going from jazz to a little funk beat there, and you see how that works. Now, I'll play with the metronome. I'll play some jazz in 3/4, and then I'll accentuate that dotted quarter note, and then I'll make that dotted quarter note my new tempo. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So you see there that I'm taking that dotted quarter note, playing it within that 3/4, and then that becomes the new tempo, and I transition to that, and then I can go back and forth. So this is a really interesting thing to do that jazz groups use to play within solo sections, even in the heads of tunes, to go back and forth. So that's a basic metric modulation. Now within that, you can also go to double time in the new tempo. So then we're modulating again, but that's just to double time. And this is what that sounds like. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So you saw there, I started out in the 3/4, I went to the dotted quarter note, then I went double time from that, and then I went back to the 3/4 and did it again. So that's 3 different tempos from one tempo. And you don't have to go back, but normally that's what happens. So again, this is very complex to do this. Now, in classical music, there's lots and lots of obviously, of instances of this. When I was in college, I studied the music of Elliott Carter, and I was playing his timpani solos. There's a book of timpani solos, and it's all based on metric modulation. And that's really where I learned about it. Some of these solos, they go from, 4 or 5 different tempos within that original tempo, and then back. So that might be something you want to go online on YouTube or something and search for Elliott Carter timpani, and you'll hear those solos. Lots of guys playing them. Try to pick, a professional playing them, and then you'll hear that modulation. If you get the book, you can watch it in action. That's how I learned about that. And then I started listening, obviously, to a lot of jazz. I had been, and was studying Miles Davis, his music, and I would do that. And then we all would get together in jam sessions and experiment. And that's what you want to do. You've got to practice with the metronome, though, because it's extremely tricky to do these, especially going to the double time and then back to the original tempo. Now let's give you another one. So let's say we're in 4/4 jazz. I'll take this beep off, okay? And we're playing a little slower here. Let's say 160. All right, and that would be my quarter note. Now, all of you know I normally practice playing jazz with the metronome on 2 and 4, but in this case it won't work because we're working on metric modulation. So what I'm going to do now is take this 4/4 and I'm going to play quarter note triplets, and let me show you how that sounds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the quarter note triplet. And that quarter note triplet in this case will become the new tempo. So let's show you that. 1, 2, 3. Now, sometimes it's hard getting back, to that thing because you're doubling up. So you could do a little fill in there. And I didn't do that time because I just wanted to show you to simplify it. But you can do a little fill to get back to it. Now, let's show you that slower because that might have been a little fast for you. So let's go pretty slow here. 120. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we went on a little journey there. Couldn't help myself. Started out with the triplet, then I double timed it, and then I tripletized that slower, and then I double time that, and I tripletized that again slower, and then I came back to the original tempo. I think that's what I did. We'll go back and listen. But I do that a lot. I'll put on a tempo, and I'll get a new tempo, you know, in other words, based off that quarter note triplet, and then I'll take that and metrically modulate that. So you can keep going in layers and layers, keep modulating, as long as you can get back to that original tempo. And that's the way I practice this. Now, if you're new to this, the way you should practice it is just going back and forth like I showed you there originally between the quarter note triplet and the new tempo. So in other words, when you're just playing in 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Triplet, 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 trip. And your mind's eye focuses on that new tempo, and that's your new tempo. So that's how you should practice that. So let's try a different kind of metric modulation where the 8th note triplet now will equal the 8th note. So if we put on the metronome on triplets, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. What happens is that can turn into the 8th note. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So don't get confused by that accented note on every quarter note, because that's going to turn into actually a bar of 6/4 now. So I got to do the math. It's a little confusing, but I'll play it for you. So I'll play kind of a nanny-go funk rhythm into a straight rock rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have one more metric modulation exercise for you today, and this is more of in the rock, pretty aggressive genre, good for soloing. And this is a 3-way metric modulation. So we're going to start at quarter note equals 120 and put your metronome on the triplet. And that sounds like this. All right, you want to leave the quarter note on and the triplet. You don't need the beep for this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that triplet and turn that into straight eighths. So we'll go from kind of a medium shuffle feel to a fast rock feel. Then what we'll do is we'll go back to that shuffle feel, that triplet, and we'll play groups of 3 within those. So in other words, 9s. All right, so that triplet, 8th note triplet, is going to turn into a quarter note triplet, and then I'm going to base my double time shuffle on that. So let me play that on the snare drum so you can hear it. So I'll start by playing the shuffle feel just on the snare drum in triplets. Then I'll go to the rock feel in 8th notes. Then I'll go back to the shuffle feel, and then I'll play groups of 9, which would be my double time shuffle. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it's always good to work out your metric modulations like that, with the metronome and then on the snare drum, without doing all the drum kit coordination first. And practice it a lot so it gets ingrained in your brain so you can, play it much easier. So I totally recommend doing that. All the time I'm practicing these things on the practice pad. It's actually pretty good for your chops as well. So let's try this now, and I'll go from, once again, a medium shuffle rhythm to a double time rock feel that's based on the triplet equaling the eighth note. And then I'll go back to the shuffle feel, and then I'll play groups of 9, which will turn into that double time shuffle. 1, 2. So if you do it correctly, the actual count that you're hearing on the beat, the 1, 2, 3, 4, will get turned around if you stay in 4/4, because that's the math of it. But as long as you stay with that triplet, you're fine. And of course, you could practice it without that beat, but I like using it because it actually lets me know where I am in the bar. So that's how you do that kind of metric modulation. So I hope this helps. This was a very advanced video. Some of my videos are pretty advanced. This is probably one of the most advanced. So I'm sure there'll be questions, and go ahead and send them to me, and I'll try to answer them to best of my ability. So we'll play a little for you going out, and we'll just stick to this feel here, and we'll see you next time.